The grand wedding hall was adorned with shimmering lights, fresh flowers, and luxurious decor. Laughter and music filled the air as guests arrived to celebrate the union of Neha and Samir. It was the happiest day of Neha's life, or so she thought. Unbeknownst to her, beneath the surface of all the joy and festivities, a shocking truth was waiting to be uncovered. A secret buried for 22 years, about to explode in the most unexpected way. Neha's childhood best friend, Anjali, was a science enthusiast, always experimenting and exploring new ideas. A week before the wedding, she had casually ordered a DNA test as part of a fun experiment to compare Neha's genetic traits with her father's. It was never meant to be anything serious. But when the results arrived, what she saw shook her to the core. The DNA test revealed an undeniable truth. Rajesh Varma, the man Neha had always known as her father, was not her biological father. Anjali stared at the report in disbelief. At first, she thought it must be a mistake, but the results were conclusive. The question now was, should she tell Neha? Would revealing this secret before her wedding ruin everything? After hours of contemplation, Anjali made a decision. Neha deserved to know the truth. The wedding day arrived, and the celebrations were in full swing. The hall was filled with music, laughter, and the aroma of delicious food. The groom's family had just arrived with the wedding procession, and the atmosphere was electric with excitement. Neha was getting ready in her bridal suite, looking radiant in her red and gold lehenga, when Anjali knocked on the door. "Neha, I need to talk to you," Anjali said, her voice shaking. "Can it wait? I'm about to get married." Neha laughed, adjusting her jewelry. "No, it can't. It's serious," Anjali insisted. Neha frowned and put down her mirror. "What is it?" Anjali hesitated before handing her the DNA test results. This proves that Rajesh uncle is not your biological father." For a moment, Neha didn't react. She scanned the paper, her eyes moving rapidly over the words. Her breath hitched. "What is this? Is this some kind of prank?" "It's not a prank," Anjali whispered. "I ran the test just for fun, but it's real." Neha's hands trembled. "No, this can't be true. There has to be a mistake." Tears welled up in her eyes. She stumbled backward, her mind reeling. Her entire existence had been based on a lie. Does my father know?" she asked in a broken voice. "I don't think so," Anjali said softly. Neha took a deep breath. She knew she couldn't let this moment pass. She needed answers. Storming into the grand wedding hall, Neha spotted her mother, Sumira, greeting guests. Her heart pounded as she approached her. "Mom," Neha said, her voice firm but shaking. "I need to talk to you. Now." Sumira turned, surprised by the urgency in her daughter's tone. "Neha, what's wrong?" Neha shoved the DNA report into her mother's hands. "Explain this." As Sumira read the paper, the color drained from her face. Her fingers gripped the paper tightly, and for a moment, she looked like she might collapse. "Neha, listen. Don't you dare tell me to listen." Neha shouted, her voice echoing through the hall. Conversations halted. Every guest turned toward them. The entire hall fell into silence. Neha's father, Rajesh, rushed over. "What's happening here?" Neha turned to him, her eyes brimming with tears. "Dad, I don't even know if I should call you that anymore." Rajesh looked confused. "What do you mean? Tell him, Mom," Neha demanded, her voice shaking with rage. Sumira swallowed hard, glancing at the hundreds of eyes now fixed on her. Her lips quivered, and then, in a voice barely above a whisper, she said, "Rajesh, Neha is not your biological daughter." The words cut through the air like a dagger. Rajesh froze, his face turning pale. "What?" Sumira broke into tears. I made a mistake, Rajesh. A long time ago. But I loved you and I didn't want to lose you." Neha gasped. "You knew? All these years, you knew, and you lied to both of us?" The hall erupted into murmurs. Relatives whispered, and guests exchanged stunned glances. Rajesh staggered backward, betrayal evident in his eyes. "You mean to tell me that for 22 years, I have been raising another man's child, and you never told me?" Sumira sobbed. "I was scared. I thought if I told you, you would leave us." And Neha, I loved her just as much as you did. She is our daughter in every way that matters. Neha shook her head. No, Mom. I was just a secret you covered up. A lie you told every single day. Tears streamed down Rajesh's face. He turned away, struggling to breathe. His whole life had just unraveled in front of an entire wedding hall. Samir, the groom, had been watching in stunned silence. He now stepped forward. Neha, what do you want to do? Neha looked at him, her heart breaking into a million pieces. I don't know. How am I supposed to get married when my entire life has been a lie? Samir gently took her hands. This changes nothing between us. I still love you. Neha searched his eyes for reassurance, but shook her head. I need time. She turned to her father, the man who had raised her, loved her, but who now stood devastated and betrayed. Dad, she said softly, I still need you. Rajesh looked at her, his eyes filled with pain. You will always be my daughter, Neha. No DNA test can change that. But your mother, she took 22 years from me. I can never forgive her for this. Sumara collapsed onto a chair, sobbing uncontrollably. Neha turned back to the stage where her wedding was supposed to take place. The wedding that would never happen. At least, not today. She lifted her veil and placed it on the table. Then, turning to the audience, she said, There will be no wedding today. With those final words, she walked out of the hall, leaving behind a shattered family, a canceled wedding, and a truth that had changed everything forever. In the days that followed, the scandal became the talk of the town. Rajesh filed for divorce. Sumara, filled with regret, tried to reach out to Neha, but the damage had been done. As for Neha, she spent weeks reflecting on her life. The man who had raised her was not her biological father, but he was still her dad. And despite the betrayal, she knew she could never abandon him. As for her real father, that was a mystery she wasn't ready to uncover just yet. One thing was, Neha walked out of the wedding hall, her heart pounding with emotions she couldn't even begin to process. The weight of the revelation pressed down on her, like an invisible force, suffocating her. The laughter and celebrations had turned into murmurs and whispers behind her. The guests, who had come to witness a joyous occasion, had instead become spectators of a family's worst nightmare. She didn't know where she was going. She just walked, her bridal dress heavy against her trembling body. Her hands were still shaking as she gripped the DNA report Anjali had given her. How could something so small, just a few sheets of paper, change everything she had ever known? Her phone buzzed in her purse, but she ignored it. She knew it was Samir, or maybe her mother, desperate to explain. But what was there to explain? 22 years of deception couldn't be undone with words. She found herself sitting on the bench outside the venue. The world around her felt surreal, like she was watching someone else's life crumble. A gentle breeze blew through the night, cooling her flushed face. Tears threatened to spill, but she held them back. She had cried enough. She heard footsteps approaching. She didn't need to turn around to know who it was. Rajesh, the man she had called Papa her entire life, sat down beside her. He didn't say anything at first, just sat there, staring ahead, lost in his own turmoil. I never doubted for a second that you were my daughter, he finally said, his voice heavy. Not once in 22 years. Neha closed her eyes, his words cutting deeper than she expected. And now, she whispered. Rajesh sighed, running a hand through his graying hair. Now, I don't know what to feel. I don't know how to look at your mother. I don't know how to look at myself. She turned to him, searching his face for the father she had always known. I didn't know Papa. I swear, I had no idea. His eyes softened. I know, but that single word, beta, was enough to break the dam inside her. Tears spilled down her cheeks as she turned and buried her face in his shoulder. He held her tightly, as if afraid she would slip away. For a moment, it felt like nothing had changed, like she was still his little girl, seeking comfort in his arms. But deep down, they both knew things would never be the same. The phone buzzed again. This time, Rajesh pulled away slightly and gave her a nod. It's Samir, he said. She wiped her tears and answered. Hello. Neha. Samir's voice was gentle, but she could hear the concern beneath it. Where are you? Outside, she murmured. I'm coming, he said, and the line went dead. Minutes later, Samir appeared. He looked relieved when he saw her, but hesitated when he noticed Rajesh. There was an awkward silence before he spoke. Neha, let's go somewhere quiet. Just you and me. Neha looked at her father. He nodded, understanding. Go. I'll be here when you need me. Samir led her to his car. They drove in silence for a while before he finally spoke. Are you okay? She let out a bitter laugh. Do I look okay? I know this is a lot, Neha, but I want you to know none of this changes how I feel about you. She turned to him. Does it? Because right now, I don't even know who I am. You're still you, he said firmly. You're still the woman I want to spend my life with. She exhaled shakily. Samir, I need time. His face fell slightly, but he nodded. I understand. She appreciated that he wasn't pressuring her. But deep down, she wasn't sure if she was ready to move forward with anyone. Not until she figured out the truth about her past. Over the next few weeks, Neha distanced herself from everything. Her wedding, her mother, and even Samir. She moved in with Anjali, needing space to process everything. Rajesh, despite his own heartbreak, remained her biggest support. One evening, as she sat on Anjali's couch, she stared at the DNA report again. There was one name missing. Her biological father. She wasn't sure if she wanted to know, but she knew she had to. The search began quietly. She contacted the DNA company and requested additional testing. When the results arrived a week later, she found herself staring at the name of a man she had never heard of before. Ashok Malhotra, a stranger. Her real father. She didn't tell anyone right away. She needed to process it herself first. She searched for him online, finding only a few vague details. He lived in another city. No social media presence. No clear picture of the kind of man he was. One evening, Rajesh found her staring at the name on the report. You found him, didn't you? She nodded slowly. Are you going to meet him? She hesitated before answering. I don't know. What if he doesn't want to meet me? Rajesh exhaled. And what if he does? That was the real question. After much contemplation, she decided to reach out. She found a phone number, her heart pounding as she dialed. A gruff voice answered. Hello. She swallowed hard. Is this Ashok Malhotra? Yes. Who's this? She took a deep breath. My name is Neha Varma. I think I might be your daughter. There was a long pause. Then, a sharp intake of breath. Where are you? He asked. Delhi, she answered. Silence again. Then, finally, come meet me. Her hands trembled as she ended the call. This was it. The moment that could change everything again. The next day, she found herself outside a small house on the outskirts of the city. Her heart pounded as she knocked on the door. It opened to reveal a man in his late 50s. He looked at her with wide eyes, and for a moment, neither of them spoke. Then his gaze softened. You look like her, he whispered. Like who? She asked. Your mother. The words sent a shiver down her spine. So it's true. He nodded slowly. Yes, Neha, I am your father. 1,000 emotions surged through her. Anger, sadness, relief. And yet, she wasn't sure what to say. I didn't know about you, he admitted. If I had, things might have been different. Different. The word echoed in her mind. How different would her life have been if her mother had told the truth? Would she have grown up knowing this man instead of the father who had raised her? She wasn't sure she would ever have an answer to that. But as she stood there, facing the man who had unknowingly given her life, she realized something. She couldn't change the past, but she could decide what to do with the future. And for the first time since her world shattered, she felt ready to move forward.